This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
You wouldn't have built a life you couldn't manage. And then all of a sudden, like the rug's pulled out from under you and you've lost your resilience, right? That's perimenopause. And there's two very, very warring factions. One is menopause ruined my good marriage, right? Because my emotional state changed so much and my partner and I just couldn't navigate through it. Okay, that's half. The other half, menopause gave me the clarity to leave a partner that was no longer serving me, and it is the best thing I've ever done. So I think it can go either way.
Have you ever found yourself standing in a room wondering why you walked in there, or bursting into tears over something that wouldn't normally faze you, or lying awake at 3 a.m. even though you're completely exhausted? Yep, me too. Okay, you're going to want to hear this. I'm Georgie McCourt, editor of Marie Claire, and welcome back to You're Going to Want to Hear This, the podcast where ordinary women share extraordinary stories. For so many women, perimenopause seems to suddenly just turn up. It doesn't announce itself with hot flushes or the end of your periods. No, it is so much sneakier. It's the anxiety, the brain fog, rage, insomnia, weight gain, low libido. Should I go on? This whole list of things that make you feel like something just isn't quite right. And too often when women do finally seek help, they're fobbed off. They're told they're just stressed or burnt out, or you're just too busy. My guest today is determined to change that. Thank goodness. Dr. Mary Claire Haver is one of the world's leading voices in women's health, a board-certified OB-GYN, menopause specialist, and the #1 New York Times bestselling author who has helped to spark this global conversation about perimenopause and menopause. Her new book is called The New Perimenopause, and it has quickly become the guidebook women have been desperately searching for. And I have quite a few questions. What is actually happening inside our bodies during perimenopause? And why are so many women being misdiagnosed? What's the deal with hormone therapy, brain fog, libido, osteoporosis? Because I'll be honest, at 44, this conversation is pretty personal. Like many women, I found myself wondering whether the changes that I've been experiencing are simply the result of a busy life or raising children, juggling work, or whether something deeper is happening. Dr. Mary Claire's explanations will not only reassure you, they'll empower you. Most of all, this episode is really about hope because while perimenopause may be inevitable, unfortunately, suffering through it is not. So if you have ever thought, I just don't feel like myself anymore, this episode is for you. Here's Dr. Mary Claire Haver.
There's a story of when I was in training and there was a woman who was in perimenopause. I know now, right? I did not know it then. And she came in with multiple vague complaints. She was in her 40s. You know, she was having anxiety, some weight gain, some headaches, itchy, dry skin, and she'd bounced around to several different doctors. So at the time, I was a brand new intern, like my first year of training. So you have to present your case to the upper level trainees. And so I, gather my chart and I go and present this case. And he happened to be a male. It could have been anyone, but he said, did you check her thyroid? Did you run some basic labs? I said, well, family medicine did this. And, she's had this and this done. He goes, oh, okay. You have a WW. And I said, excuse me? And he said, don't write this in the chart, but we call this a whiny woman. This is kind of what women tend to go through at this age.
Oh my God.
So that kind of it's all in her head mentality was systemic. This was an institutional thing. And so that story bubbled up in my head years later when I was writing The New Menopause, and I wrote about it in the book. And I've gone on the road. I've spoken at multiple institutions all over the US, actually spoke in Australia last year. And I've asked, did anybody else have this experience? Oh, yes. They called them whiny gynies. They called them Madame Dolores, like in Mexico, in Florida, where we have a lot of Hispanic patients. There were colloquial names for this type of patient all over the US. And then when I went to Australia, I pulled some clinicians aside and said, did y'all have something similar? And they said, absolutely. So I think because medicine in general worldwide was built, at least the way we practice, in Western society, was built by men for men, anything different, anything unusual, anything that doesn't follow that male construct. So when you talk about things like perimenopause and menopause, it is going to be considered to be abnormal. And I was taught to dismiss these women, right? And it really took years of practice, becoming friends with my patients, living in a small town, doing everything outside of the office with these women, raising children together, doing book club, running marathons, going to church together, for me to realize she's not crazy. Like, this is actually happening to her. This is real. This is not a psychological problem that she's manifesting with somatic symptoms, which is what I was taught women tended to do.
It's so complicated, and that dismissal, I mean, millions of women around the world have experienced that and then just thought that they are going crazy or they're being whingy. You describe, and I love this, you describe perimenopause as the hormonal zone of chaos. And that's exactly, I mean, I'm 44, so I guess
you're in it.
I'm in it.
Most likely, yeah.
I feel like I'm in it. I definitely have all the symptoms. So what's actually happening inside?
Yeah.
I feel like this is going to be a bit of a counseling session for myself because I am right in it.
Okay.
What is happening inside the body?
We have to go back to kind of basic biology and endocrinology, but I'm going to, but once you understand it, it's going to make so much sense to you and you're going to be, oh, okay. So females versus males. Females are born with our entire egg supply. Men after puberty until death, as long as they're healthy, will make their genetic material fresh every day. Okay. We are stuck with a set amount of eggs that we're born with. So at birth, a female will have 1 to 2 million-ish eggs. And then by the time she's 30, it will already be down to 10% of the original supply. And by the time she's 40, we're looking at around 3%. Okay. On average. And menopause, full menopause represents no more eggs. You have run out. So let's go back to pre-menopause. In pre-menopause, so menopause has not entered the chat. We have enough eggs to function properly. Every month we have a cycle, right? In a healthy woman, roughly 28 days. And ovulation starts in the brain, not in the ovaries. The ovaries are simply waiting to be given instructions, right? That's why we don't ovulate as children, right? They are being suppressed by the brain. When after a normal cycle, our estrogen levels fall off. So at ovulation, your estrogen levels peak and then they drift down. The brain is like, whoa, where's that estrogen, right? I like that high level. I want it back. So the hypothalamus detects the estrogen levels. Then it will send a signal to the pituitary gland, which will then make something called LH and FSH, which go down from the brain to the ovary and then bind to what we call the follicular cells around the eggs. And that is where the sex hormones are produced, the estrogen, the progesterone, okay, and testosterone more at a steady state basis. So in a normal, healthy woman, we have this very predictable ebb and flow of estrogen, progesterone, LH, and FSH. And it's very predictable. On day 12, they're going to look like this. On day 18, they're going to look like that. On day 21, and so on, unless she's pregnant or suppressing her periods for some reason. So in perimenopause begins when we reach a critical egg threshold level, where those signals from the brain no longer work like they used to. The signals go down, bind to whatever eggs are left, but they're not getting that robust response yet because of how many are left. So the brain starts getting very upset and saying, where's my estrogen? It's time. We're on day 28. We should start, this should be happening. And the ovaries are like, I'm doing all I can. So the brain starts sending higher and higher levels of that FSH and LH in order to force the ovulation. So what happens is you end up getting sometimes 2 ovulations in 1 month. You get these very erratic levels, much higher estradiol levels than we ever had outside of pregnancy. Then they crash down and progesterone can never quite keep up. So it used to look like that beautiful, predictable EKG-like ebb and flow month after month after month now is chaos, unpredictable like spaghetti. So what hates hormonal chaos? The brain. The first symptoms of perimenopause are in the brain: sleep disruption, mental health changes, and brain fog. Or as a woman beautifully put it last year in one of the greatest studies I've ever read, I just don't feel like myself.
It's so interesting, but also this is why so many women get dismissed because, and I've been told this before by gynecologists, well, you're really busy. You've got 2 kids, you work full time, you're really busy, which is true. And all of that's true.
Yeah, but you were busy a year ago and this wasn't happening, right?
Exactly.
You built this life. You built this life and you had it managed. You wouldn't have built a life you couldn't manage. And then all of a sudden, like the rug's pulled out from under you and you've lost your resilience, right? That's perimenopause.
And I think it's also why it can be such a troubling time in a relationship as well. And I know a lot of women, like divorces do happen, and because these mental changes inside your mind, like it's really hard when you just feel like you're not in control of your emotions or your moods, and it's quite scary, I think.
Every time I post about divorce and perimenopause and menopause on the internet, there's 2 camps. Like the video always goes viral, and there's 2 very, very warring factions. One is menopause ruined my good marriage, right? Because my emotional state changed so much and my partner and I just couldn't navigate through it. Okay, that's half. The other half, menopause gave me the clarity to leave a partner that was no longer serving me, and it is the best thing I've ever done. So I think it can go either way.
I think that the second camp is so true because in a way, women are so good at masking their emotions and they're so good at being polite and people pleasing. But if your moods are changing, you might just suddenly be like, you know what? I'm sick of being a people pleaser. I'm just going to say it as it is. And this isn't working for me and you're not supporting me. And that's the second camp, right? Where there's the clarity and they're sick of masking and people pleasing.
Yeah, exactly it. So I think it can go either way. Some women lament the loss of their marriage and blame menopause. Others say this gave me what I needed to do to leave a relationship that did not serve me.
You're listening to You're Going to Want to Hear This with me, Georgie McCourt. We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Mary Claire Haber. But if this conversation is already sounding familiar, if you've ever been told you're simply stressed, overwhelmed, burnt out, or you're imagining things, I hope that it's reassuring to hear that you are not alone. We're about to dive into some of the most misunderstood aspects of perimenopause, including why anxiety, rage, brain fog, and even relationship breakdowns can be linked to hormonal changes long before menopause officially begins. We're going to be back in a bit. So to a woman who is experiencing those symptoms, they're not sleeping, they might be feeling different from a mental perspective, what are the first steps that they can take? Because it's so confusing.
So assuming she's educated herself, she can now put 2 and 2 together and say, something's not right. This might be perimenopause. I've looked at my external factors. Nothing's really changed in my environment. I had these stresses managed before and it's no longer happening. You need to find a partner in care, a menopause educated clinician. So, for in your country, it's usually a GP. And doesn't have to be a gynecologist, but it is going to take someone who has sought training outside of the traditional system. We are not doing a great job in prioritizing women's health outside of reproduction in either of our countries. So fortunately, there's menopause societies with certified, who do certification courses. There are great resources available online. I mean, the group that brought me and a few other docs in last year, Carrie Cashel was amazing. There's so many great practitioners there that are really kind of carving out a really niche practice and really just treating menopausal women.
It is really about having that support, the right support, because I went to my gynecologist recently and explained my symptoms. And she said to me, well, I think you're just busy and you're only 44, so it's probably a bit early, because I started talking to her about HRT. And so I walked away just feeling a little bit confused and a little bit, and she wrote me a script for HRT, but she didn't really explain how to use it. And so I just kind of got home and took it for one day and then stopped because I didn't have the right support. So now I feel like I need to start my journey again and go and find someone
who's really gonna, feel comfortable with it, partner. I mean, at least she tried, And so that's a step. Probably 5 years ago, she would have said absolutely not. I think this is the beauty of social media, at least for me, is that conversation has really exploded and the clinicians are paying attention. So, and realizing, hey, if I want to do this care, I need to really step up and get some extra training.
So if we think about those as the first symptoms, how does it evolve?
Progress.
Yes,
Yeah.
progress.
So
Evolve.
forever, perimenopause was only defined by cycle irregularity and vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes. So that was it. If you didn't have those, you couldn't be in perimenopause. And we know that's not true. But a lot of doctors, that's the only thing that they learned was if her periods aren't irregular and she's not having hot flashes, she's just crazy. The kind of evolution of symptoms, it usually starts in the brain. This kind of, I can't put my finger on it. Something's not right. I'm more irritable. I'm having rage. I'm sad for no reason. I'm not sleeping as well as I used to. And then we see some of the systemic issues like dry skin, dry eyes, dry mouth, dry vagina, vaginal pain, loss of lubrication, body composition changes, weight gain around the midsection. We see palpitations, ringing in the ear, itching in the ear, tinnitus,
My gosh,
vertigo.
as you say this, I literally experienced that ringing in the ear, like for the first time a few months ago. And I was like, oh my God, what is this?
Yes.
I didn't
So
even know
we
that was a
see
symptom. That's
gastrointestinal
interesting.
changes. The microbiome completely changes. How we recirculate estrogen and the gut changes. Our gut microbiome starts becoming like a man's microbiome. Our insulin resistance increases. Our LDL cholesterol tends to go up about 20%. So you will see lab markers like vitamin D levels drop because we're not absorbing it as well. Ferritin starts dropping, especially if you're having heavy periods associated with menopause. So by the time you get to the hot flashes and the cycle irregularity, you're towards the end. This is like a year or two until you're menopausal on average for most women.
One of the most surprising things that you found in your work is that symptoms can start as early as mid-30s, which is so
and
much
even earlier if she's premature menopause. So I'll give you the for Caucasian women, the average age of menopause, it's a spectrum. So average is 51 in the US. I think you guys are about the same. And then, but still normal, under the normal curve is 46 to 55. Okay. Perimenopause is 7 to 10 years before that. So just back the math up. So somewhere between 36, 37 to mid 40s, like that's it. That is when it starts for most women. And they're like, oh, and here's where we get pushback in medicine and it makes me crazy. Show me a downside of educating a woman about her body. And I'll tell you, there are people sitting in massive academic positions who are telling me not to talk about this because I'm going to scare women. I'm like, you don't think they're scared right now because they don't understand what's happening to their bodies? Like, we owe them this education. We owe you guys centuries of research so that you understand what's happening. We don't let a young girl go through puberty without someone holding her hand and explaining the basics.
Growing up, well, I guess I thought of first discovered menopause in my 20s. My understanding was just it's sort of something that happens when you're 50 and I guess it'll be over quickly. But it wasn't spoken about, let alone perimenopause. And it really does, like, it starts so much earlier than 50. Such a misconception. It's
so much earlier. Yeah.
Something that a lot of women find is that they are prescribed antidepressants when they first present with symptoms like anxiety and irritability and low mood. And I've been in that position as well. So and it's such a confusing time, how can women tell the difference between depression and hormone-driven changes?
You can't. It's the same, right? The brain is not firing on all cylinders and our neurotransmitters are directly affected by these hormone changes. Like how much serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine we make is dependent on what our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels are. We can't get away from that. So, and the brain was very, very used to this predictable ebb and flow. And now we've taken that predictability away and it's very chaotic. So what we've learned from studies done in Australia is if a woman is perimenopausal age and it's a new onset of anxiety or depression, you are better off. You're going to have better results if you start her on menopause hormone therapy rather than starting her on a antidepressant. Okay. Now, if she's on an antidepressant and was doing great And then all of a sudden her symptoms are back with no new external changes. No one died. She hasn't lost her job. Nothing crazy happened. Adding in menopause hormone therapy to her SSRI, she is going to benefit more. So the data is in the US, we double the rate of prescriptions for antidepressants across the menopause transition. We go from 10% of the population to 20 for women.
Menopause hormone therapy, it's obviously, well, I'm sure it's the same in the US. It's still a contentious subject. Some women are scared of it.
It shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be.
It is safe for the vast majority of the population. It really is.
And so how have you found, because every woman that I've spoken to who is on HRT swears by it. They said it just changed their life. What has been your experience through your work and the women that you work with?
Mm-hmm. So not every patient is a candidate. And I only treat menopause now, right? They come to me for menopause treatment. They're very self-selected. And so, a large majority of my patients end up on menopause hormone therapy. So, but it is the tears, the hugs, the thanks for giving them their resilience back. It's not a miracle. They are simply sleeping, not flying off, emotionally for such a small thing. They feel like they've gotten their ability to build that life back. And that's all they wanted. So is it a miracle for some women? They think so. And it is simply a tool in the toolkit. When we talk about longevity and building a runway to decrease the risk of osteoporosis and frailty and dementia, menopause hormone therapy really is just a tiny tool in that toolkit. We're talking exercise, nutrition, stress reduction, putting up boundaries, maintaining connections, friendships, love, all of that plays into it. So I'm always talking about the toolkit, and we're not just slapping estrogen patches on everyone and saying, goodbye, go live your best life. I mean, it is constantly helping her build a toolkit so she can thrive for the next 30 years. Look, I'm 57 years old. So I know these listeners are going to be much younger than me. Listen to mama. Okay. I am living my best life. I am healthier, happier, more fulfilled. I'm having better sex. I have better boundaries. I say no. I am living the life of my dreams. I have a better job than I've ever had. I just love my life. I get up every day excited about my life. And I have stress. I have trauma. I have all the normal things that people go through, but I am truly, truly joyful. And yes, hormone therapy is a part of that, but every day I get up and make sure I have that toolkit so that I can stay in this thriving state. And I want that for everyone.
I love that you say you're 57 and you're living your best life. It reminds me when I'm divorced now, but I was doing marriage counseling and my marriage counselor was in her 50s and I was in my 30s with 2 young children. And I was saying, I just feel like I should be having the best sex of my life because I'm in my 30s and, I'm young-ish. And she said, can I just get a bit personal with you for a little bit? And I said, sure. She's like, I'm in my 50s. I'm having the best sex of my life. And I remember just sitting there going, but how? She's in her 50s. This belongs to younger people. It doesn't belong to people in their 50s.
No. I mean, empty nesting really helps, by the way. So you'll get there one day.
Yeah.
So that, not having that fear, always checking on children and stuff. But yeah, I didn't either. I would have said the same thing at 30. This is it. This is the peak. And what is this? I'm exhausted. I got 2 toddlers. I'm working 100 hours a week. What is... it was not about joy. And it totally is now. So, yeah.
I think it's such a nice narrative. And I have found even in my 40s, while my children are still at home, life has got better and better because you feel, and I love that there's hope after, perimenopause and menopause and that you can get through that. And there's joy and happiness after it or even during it if you're informed.
That's what I really hope with the book is, this will be, so many women are just so lost and disrupted and feel like they lose years of their lives through this, and I did. And so, that this will be that educational guide with tools and tips and, make them feel, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. We're going to figure this out.
How would you describe your own personal journey through perimenopause?
I was a terrible mother. I mean, when I think back of just flying off the handle at my kids for the littlest thing. And I remember driving, and the younger one she was very sassy. I don't know
Not the
if y'all
sassy
use that
ones. Yeah.
term. She was my
Yeah,
sassy one.
definitely.
And she said something, and I like slammed on the brakes in the middle of the like road, and like to where the car went jerk. And I saw her little face and her eyes in the rearview mirror. And I was like, what did I just do? Like, what did I just do? I just scared her to death, and just a lot of yelling, a lot of not being called, the way I approach conflict now is so different. And I'm just so sad for them to have that kind of a mother. But, I've gotten therapy, I've done the work, it's all but so much better now, my relationship with them.
And we've
So,
all done it. Well, like I've yelled
mhm.
many, many times and like lost it, and you feel such guilt over it.
Mm-hmm. I was going through a lot. I was losing one of my best friends, my brother, to a protracted illness. Then my next brother got sick with cancer, and my dad was sick. It was a lot for them to go through. And then COVID hit. I was perimenopausal. Kind of breaching into menopause during COVID, and that was, so a lot going on at that time.
What changes did you make in your own life, and what
Mm-hmm.
changes do you tell the women that you work with to make? And just obviously there's hormones and things like that, but just from a lifestyle perspective.
Totally changed my priorities. So I come first. I have to take care of me, my physical wellness, my mental wellness, my, spiritual wellness. I have to focus on me. I don't come second or third or fourth. I come first. And that has made the huge difference. So I prioritize my time first, and then whatever's left goes to work and my children and my husband. And it has just made the world a better place for me.
So there's boundaries, and it often is later in life that we really discover how to actually put boundaries in place.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to brain fog, because it's something that I hear all the time. I experience it. So many women describe it, and they forget words mid-sentence. They're struggling.
Can't remember where you're driving. Why did I walk into this room? Where's my phone that's in my hand, or my glasses that are on my face?
Or my phone's in my pocket. I've walked around the whole house and my phone's in my pocket. What's actually happening neurologically during this time?
So that's a great question. There is no one knew, okay, until a neuroradiologist named Lisa Mosconi started working with humans. The preliminary work was done in New Mexico with Dr. Robbie. And Lisa was like, something's not right, and they didn't. So she wanted to study estrogen in the brain across the menopause transition. Okay. They didn't have a tracer. There was no when we do a thyroid scan, you give them this radioiodide thyroid stuff, and it goes into the thyroid. You can see it light up and yada, yada, yada. They didn't have something like that for the brain to trace estrogen. So they had to create it. Like, no one had ever studied this in the history of menopause. What does estrogen do in the brain across the transition? What do estrogen receptors do? What do we see? And she was even looking at glucose uptake, how is glucose being utilized in the brain? So what they found is in the brainstem, where we consolidate memories, and in the frontal lobe, that's really the memory consolidation, and then how they're stored, undergoes chaos. So it's really fascinating. And this has only been in the last few years that we've been able to research this to this degree to realize what, believe women this is happening, and then say, okay, let's map this out and figure out what's going on. It's so fascinating.
The emotional regulation at work is a really hard thing, because if you're going through all these changes and you're in a job where you're there every single day full time, or even if you're part time, not being emotionally regulated like that, it can make or break a job. So I'm not surprised that women exit the workforce.
And it's, this is our time. We're losing C-suite executives. We're losing people with all their wisdom at the top of their game, where they're supposed to be leaning in and leading, and they can't do it. this doesn't have to happen. We can give them this back.
You write that perimenopause symptoms can mimic conditions like ADHD or burnout. Why is misdiagnosis so common, and what should clinicians be looking for instead?
One is looking at, the timing of symptoms. I have an ADHD specialist coming on the podcast, so I follow her and I watch her. And ADHD is like a constellation of symptoms. And so what she feels like is that you were on the spectrum, but you were just managed, right? And then we remove estrogen, which was a protective layer. Now that's gone. And all of a sudden your symptoms were managed by you having enough estrogen on board, and now that's gone. And so you've lost the ability to cope. So I have two daughters, both with ADHD. One was diagnosed and treated as early as second grade. The other one managed, right? And she didn't need medication until the MCAT. So she's in medical school and they have to take the medical college admissions test. And she was just getting railed by the study she had to do for this. And at that point, she went on medication. That really taught me as a mother that this is a spectrum, and everybody's treatment is going to be different based on what their needs are. And so I really feel like women whose ADHD is really just getting unmasked in menopause, where they probably had some degree of it before.
I got diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago, and I've done my whole life without medication and was quite scared about taking medication. And now I take medication sometimes, and then sometimes I don't feel like it. But it is interesting because it's not like I've functioned my whole life without it, but it's just now being in the job I'm in, which is quite intense. It just felt like, okay, well, medication might work for me at this point in my life. But it's interesting. Different points in your life, you need different things. What about weight gain? Because again, so many of my friends, they describe the weight gain around their stomach.
Right.
And it's that's what we're all discussing.
So that is what brought me to the menopause table, right? That was the first symptom where I was like, I've been thin my whole life, outside of pregnancy, and was like, what is going on with this? So turns out body composition changes are a predictable biological consequence of hormone change. How about that? It is normal to gain abdominal fat. So a woman who is premenopausal, her total body fat, generally 8% to 10% is intra-abdominal, inside the abdominal cavity. Okay. What we call belly fat. Take her through the menopause transition. No changes in stress, no changes in diet and exercise. Nothing has changed. You will increase that by 2 to 3 times. So roughly 23% of her total body fat will shift to the abdomen.
Wow.
At the same time, she's undergoing age-related muscle loss. So what does she do to combat the weight gain? She does more cardio, right? She's not lifting weights. She's doing cardio. So she's losing more and more muscle. She's under eating to try to get low calories so she can lose the weight. So she's chipping away at her muscle strength, which is lowering her basal metabolic rate, while all the inflammation from menopause is driving more fat to the abdomen. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Wow. And that's, again, I know so many cases of that where they're just like, right, I need to do more cardio. But it's all about weights and strength and
right.
And I imagine, and I obviously don't know much about this, but like the rise of weight loss drugs, right?
Do they use them in Australia?
Yeah.
Here it's we use them in clinic. We have them.
Yes, but
we prescribe them.
Muscle mass.
It's a double-edged sword, right? When we have patients come in clinic, knowing that if they're given indiscriminately, incorrectly, without proper counseling, you are putting her at risk for future osteoporosis and frailty and sarcopenia, low muscle mass. So before we'll prescribe a GLP-1. So usually in their first visit, they have an hour visit, all about menopause. We go through everything. Then after 3 months, they come back and we do all the lifestyle changes on the front end. And then we see if they're still a candidate for a GLP-1. We have another hour of counseling to go through all the potential side effects and the long-term consequences if not done properly. So I had a guest on the podcast, Rocio Salas Whalen, who wrote Weightless, and it's available in the UK. So she has a GPS prescription she gives to her patient, which is the GLP-1 the protein intake, and strength training, GPS. And you have to do all three. And she and I both monitor muscle mass and visceral fat in clinic with the InBody machine. So we do impedance tracking on our patients to track muscle and fat loss. And if they're losing too much muscle, we stop the medication and recounsel. Like, it is too dangerous. But I think a lot of people are getting their medications from doctors who don't understand this, who aren't trained, who are just trying to make a quick buck at these med spas. And I really caution patients, like, the long-term consequences are real if you don't do this properly.
I think that what scares me is things like osteoporosis and
and it should scare the hell out of you. I mean, you are a fair blonde, like thin. I look at your arms, like you're high risk. I don't know if your mother's fractured, your grandmother. So like my mother and my grandmother had multiple osteoporotic fractures and were miserable from pain. I am not interested in that being my reality. So I am so focused on weightlifting and protein intake. Like, everything I do is to be strong, not thin. And that is the kind of the message we try to talk to our patients about.
It's so hard. In my case, I'm addicted to sugar, right? I love chocolate and I probably don't eat enough protein, but I'm so worried, and it's something that I need to work on personally, especially in perimenopause. I know that sugar is not, like, that bar of chocolate is not helping me. What role does sugar versus protein play?
Yeah.
How should we be approaching it?
So everybody can have a little sugar, okay? And the rule of thumb is 25 grams of added sugar per day. And you're not going to get yourself into trouble. So that's your budget. You get to decide what you spend that on. Okay. When you go above that, you start risking increasing inflammation. So women who limit their added sugars to 25 grams a day or less don't have excessive visceral fat, don't get diabetes, don't, live much healthier lives. And this is sugars that are added. This is not fruit and vegetables and sugar found naturally. Okay. This is from processing of food and cookies and cakes and all the things. So if you can limit your added sugars to 25 grams a day, you probably won't suffer from excessive inflammation and all the downstream effects of that.
And osteoporosis, what are the statistics around how many women will get that?
50% of women will have an osteoporotic fracture before they die. Me or you, okay? Now, if it's your hip, if you have it surgically repaired, your risk of death in 1 year with surgical repair is 29%. If you're too sick to have it repaired, they won't take you to the OR because your heart, you're not a candidate. 79% die in the first year. So this is what we're talking about. I am not interested in osteoporotic fracture. So there's no guarantee, but I know I can limit that risk by a constellation of things that I'm doing. Vitamin D, a lot of calcium, like calcium-rich food. I'm doing strength training on a regular basis. I do jump training. I get regular bone density scans. Like, we are in charge of this. This is avoidable.
And that's the thing. We are in charge in it. We are in charge of it. And I think a lot of women, especially when you first start experiencing symptoms, you just feel helpless. You just feel like, I can't do anything. I don't know what to do. No one's telling me. And like, you feel helpless, but you're right. We are in charge of it.
You're powerful. You're not helpless. You are so powerful. You can absolutely control how you age. Like, and we give you a guidebook here, on how to avoid these things. And most of it is lifestyle. And we've just been given really bad advice.
We've been speaking with Dr. Mary Claire Haber about the realities of perimenopause and why so many women spend years searching for answers before they find the right support. Still to come, we discuss hormone therapy, libido, weight gain, osteoporosis, and the one message that Dr. Mary Claire wishes every woman understood about this stage of her life. You're really going to want to hear this. I'll be back in a minute.
Loss of libido is something that many women experience, but sometimes they don't want to talk about it openly, or they do, or it becomes a joke amongst friends that, I don't want to have sex with my husband anymore. Why has sexual health been so neglected?
For women, not for men. We have 37 drugs for men's sexual health. We got 2 for women, 2 FDA approved for women. We were taught to serve and then fade. Sex has always been considered something that we do for other people, and our own pleasure is secondary. I erase that narrative. Your pleasure is primary. Your pleasure, you come first. Okay, literally. Okay. So when I have a patient who comes in with sexual dysfunction, it usually falls into 5 buckets, and there could be overlap. So there is pain. Okay. If it hurts, we must fix the pain. Stop everything until we figure out why you're hurting. It should never hurt. Let me repeat. Sex should never be painful, only pleasurable. Okay. Unless you're into that kind of stuff, but that's a whole other discussion. There could be a desire disorder. So that's in the brain. Your brain doesn't, that flip, that switch that says, I want to do this. And then we have spontaneous desire. Most women don't have that, where you just wake up, I want sex right now. Most women have reactive desire, meaning you need a stimulus or something to say, hey, oh, wow, that was, he put the dishes away, or she, whatever it is, like, or we saw a sexy movie or watched Heated Rivalry, and you're like, oh, this seems like a really good idea. So that's in the brain. We have arousal disorder, where you're not getting enough blood flow to the area. Very common in perimenopause and menopause, where you can't get the juices flowing or the blood to go where it needs to. You don't have enough lubrication, the genital urinary syndrome of menopause. And we have relationship disorders. That's the first thing I ask my patients. Did you ever want to do this? Was this ever a good idea? And they're like, no, I've never had desire. I'm like, okay, that's, do you love your partner? Is this, do you miss it? So it's a very nuanced conversation, but most women, it's desire. That's where we start. Okay. There is a lot of pain though. So, and desire in the brain is neurotransmitters, right? And so testosterone can be incredibly helpful for these women when we rule out the other causes, right? And there's also in the US 2 FDA approved medications that work on releasing dopamine. Dopamine's that hormone that makes you want to do pleasurable things. So we are seeing with GLP-1s a little bit of a mismatch. So some women, because of the weight loss and how they feel about their bodies, you see increasing desire. Other women, it dampens the pleasure center in the brain, that drive. And so, and in men, we're seeing GLP-1s are kind of dampening some of the desire issues. So, there's a lot of long conversations around, where's this coming from?
And do you think as well, we live in a society where we want a quick fix. So we want okay.
Oh,
so
I do. Everyone does.
Everyone.
Right.
I mean, I'd
Fix
love
this
everything
tomorrow
right now. With all of these things, they're complex conversations. It doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to, for example, your libido is not going to come arriving back the next morning.
Well, watch Heated Rivalry and let me know.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen it.
I haven't watched it either, but I've heard.
Oh my God. Wait. Oh.
Right. There's my weekend plans. With hormone therapy, how long is this journey? I know there's no answer for one person.
Listen, once the hormones exit the chat, they're never coming back. So this is a conversation for the rest of your life. This is not a one and done. You can be healthy without hormone therapy, but it is harder for most women. And so these menopause conversations, you are menopausal, you are a menopausal woman forever. So, we spend most of our lives as menopausal women, more than we did as in fertility, if you think about it. So that it's just been ignored or minimized, or just, we've been treated like small men with our health, our cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, it's ridiculous. And so we really, really, really have to focus on the health of women. I hate to say women's health because everybody goes to the bikini, the breast, and the uterus, and the vagina. And I'm like, hey, there's other parts of me, that are important. So, what I hope this book, these conversations spark is the realization that the health of women is important at all parts of their lives, not just when they're fertile.
And going back to hormone therapy, what are the biggest things that you want women to understand about the benefits and the risks today?
Yeah. So every medication, Tylenol, aspirin, everything has a risk and benefit profile. And it's very nuanced and very dependent. But I can say with all conviction, for the vast majority of women, the benefits are going to outweigh the risks. So it will be miraculous for your hot flashes. Nothing works better. Okay. It will always protect your bones. In the US, it is FDA approved for the prevention of osteoporosis. So I start my conversations there with patients. It will always protect your genital urinary system. You will suffer GSM without it. So, and for me, that's non-negotiable. For that, we can do topical local estrogen, which does not absorb systemically. So even if you have a tumor that has been fed by estrogen, you could still do vaginal estrogen. So, these are the conversations we need to be having. And vaginal estrogen is life-saving. We will cut postmenopausal UTIs and therefore sepsis by 50%. So, and if any of your listeners out there are being treated for recurrent UTIs with antibiotics after antibiotics, this is a mistake. You need to consider some vaginal estrogen and get your, the health of your vagina back. Perimenopause is like pinning the tail on a moving donkey. And so what works in this phase of perimenopause may not work, and we'll have to dose adjust. But the good news is post-menopause, things tend to level out and it's a lot easier to find treatment.
So I think that's where the patience, which I don't have much patience, but like being patient and knowing that you don't just get prescribed, the drugs and the next day you're fine. Like it's very much, it's a journey.
I mean, it could take 3 to 4 weeks to make the hot flashes go away. So, if that's our primary end of treatment.
And Dr. Mary Claire, I would just love to ask you to women who come to you who are experiencing perimenopause and they're just feeling totally overwhelmed, the name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This. So what's one message for women that you want them to know about perimenopause?
Perimenopause is inevitable. It's not optional, but suffering is not.
That was Dr. Mary Claire Haver, the author of the new Perimenopause. For generations, women have been told just to push through, to stay quiet. We're told to accept that we're exhausted and it's just because we're too busy, or to ignore anxiety, feeling overwhelmed or invisible. What Dr. Mary Claire's work reminds us is that understanding what is happening in our bodies is not a luxury. It's essential healthcare, and we must put ourselves first. If today's episode sparks something for you, whether that be recognition, relief, or simply just curiosity, I highly recommend picking up a copy of the new Perimenopause. It's super practical, evidence-based, and incredibly empowering. We'll put a link in our show notes. Most importantly, if you know a woman who keeps saying, I just don't feel like myself anymore, please send her this episode. Chances are that she'll recognize herself in this conversation too. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow us on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Leave a review and share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Georgie McCourt, and this has been You're Going to Want to Hear This. I'll see you next week.